Hey everyone, it's Glenn from Mudflood Australia. This is the third video, I suppose, in a section regarding the inland sea and what this really is all about. One of the other videos talked about the inland sea proposed by Maslin in his book Friends of Australia, which shows a map of an inland sea that no one really takes seriously, and I thought it was a bit of a joke. People tried to look for it and couldn't find it. Though they did spend an enormous amount of effort, and the inland lake is roughly here. So one of the things I wanted to go back to is page 125. He discusses perpetual warfare exists between the Malays, who visit the north and northwest coast of Australia, I wonder why, and the Maragas, or savages, who are formed are generally an athletic, muscular race displaying considerable share of courage and more cunning. These guys couldn't even tell the difference between Malays and the Europeans. So the Maragas, who are they? Now, it looks like they're black African. That's what they sound like. The name Maragas is associated with the country Mali, if the name comes up at all. The Mali Kingdom was the richest kingdom in the world when it came to gold in the 13th, 14th century. It started around the 10th, 11th century, and it progressed and had a massive fleet, largest fleet I think around the 13th, 14th century, in the late medieval period, and most likely travelled around the world. Now, here's Mali. As you can see, there's the gold, and then people that would have, that's the gold mines today. I'm assuming it was all over the place before. If we go back to our wonderful little map, we have this wonderful desert here, and as if nature wanted us to have desert. I know it says that deserts are unique and it's great, it's got their own environment, but I don't know why you need so much. If you go around the world, you'll see that deserts are going to be associated with areas of duress, slavery and mining, and the mining resources. Why would you have this much desert? It makes no sense. I would imagine the reason why you have these deserts is because you have an uncontrollable need to develop power through wood. I said in one of my last videos that the Dutch used up all the wood in Poland or Eastern Europe somewhere, Hungary, Poland, I can't remember what it was. It was one of the countries, and it completely consumed the entire forest by 1643, which is very, very early on in their maritime history. So therefore, if they're using so much wood to create a ship, then they'd be going through a lot. If you go through here, most of this would have had red cedars. There is still tall trees around here, but they would have had huge trees in the day. They would have been 100 meters high, massive things, and they would have been cut down for ships. And that, of course, creates your first issue. Once you get rid of the trees at the front of the coast, the environment becomes exposed to changes in climate. Also, the trees create an effect on the weather as it comes in, and it affects the precipitation because the high trees have an interaction with the weather itself and the way the clouds form and hold water and all that kind of thing. So I'm interested in what they said. There's black Africans there, but were they? Well, let's have a look. So there's a few theories on the genome. First of all, I wanted to talk about, before going to the genetics, right? I just want to go on what I think has happened here. I think this is a combination of mining, and I'm not talking about, pre-Andaluvian and Atlantis and, what have you. I'm just talking about 14th, 15th century. It's a long time ago. I mean, you got to think that going back, if you go back through actual known history of the area, just to give you a brief idea. The greater Hindustan, or the greater Hindu kingdoms were all through this area, particularly Indonesia as well. And the Indians, of course, were big seafarers at the time. This was their entire cultural catchment, and that's why you see all the great Hindu, and you got Sanskrit Hindu temples and everything. So that goes up to the 11th century-ish, 12th century, and then you have the caliphates take over, and they take most of this, and the caliphates are there. And then, of course, funny enough, Kublai Khan up here somewhere realises there's a wonderful flourishing kingdom and sends emissaries to demand payments and tributes and all sorts of crazy things. So there you go. And of course Kublai Khan is the beginning of Tartaria, and of course Tartaria is overrated, and it's got nothing to do with much of anything. So basically this area was already busy for a long period of time, and you have to ask yourself, well, they were building big ships back in the late Middle Ages. So in terms of this is the area they would have accessed. The further south they would have gone, the tougher it would have got to really come back. And they were too busy trying to manage this area. There's probably plenty of resources here anyway, so they wouldn't need to go too far south. And there was probably Polynesian whalers here, and it would have been too aggressive for them. So I'm going with the fact that they would have been just around this part, and that's where they would have traded their wood and their metals. So if you go back in, I think we're dealing with a significant mining operation. I would only say last 500 years, 600 years. This is a video, I'm just going to play it quickly, of a man that's done a medieval gold mining with do-it-yourself wooden sluice.
Metal bits and pieces made up. Right. For example, the shoes for the medieval spade and the medieval shovel. I'm not a blacksmith, and
you're not a blacksmith,
while I could learn a whole nother...
So, they would have done this for 100, 200 years of just guys turning up and just washing for gold. If in those days, the gold wouldn't have needed to be underground. It would have just been on the top. If you go to the natural resources map of Australia, you have this map. It shows what has it got? It's got what has it got? There's your gold, AU. So you got gold here. You got gold. AB asbestos, as much use as it. AG silver. There's some there. Not much here anymore, but if you go down, there's a map down here. It's quite interesting. Gold, lots of that. There you are. There's a gold deposit around here. We're talking this region, but there's certainly gold there. There seems to be quite an amount of it. So I think would have been gold on the surface initially, and that over time that gold goes, and then you end up with having to dig for it. Okay, so that's that. Now, what I want to then do is discuss the genetics, okay? And this is what I've sort of come up with, if I can just find it, sorry. A genomic history of Aboriginal Australia. So, who were the original inhabitants of northwest Australia? We're not talking about northeast. Alright, okay. This is a very exciting things I do. Alright. Good paper, I must say. That's quite involved. Goes for all the genetics. I just want to go for the tables and just discuss. They did a lot of sampling, not so much in Northwest, but anyway. Okay. So if we go through these things that say PIL, this is WCD. I mean, that's roughly close to. These are the sample groups that are close to the area of Northwest. It's not exactly close, but that I do. This column's mitochondrial, which is the X or the female DNA. Though men have both Y and X, but here's the Y chromosome. If you go through this, you have C1b, which is typical of the Australian Aborigine. M42 is not typical of. Well, it is typical now, but if you go through all the categories, these areas have an M42 bias. There's a lot of M42, there's a lot of C1b. If you go down to here, you have a bit of M42 X chromosome haplogroup. That's a haplogroup, so it's a subset of the chromosome. Now, that's fine, but if you go back to the genetics of the Mali people, it's going, well, okay. You do not have any match or any crossover from here to here. There is no crossover. So obviously, if you're dealing with traders, they're going to be obviously men that go here, and then they're going to shag lots of they're going to do what they do, seafaring blokes do, and then they're going to do whatever they do, and they're going to settle here and be on a good wicket somehow, and then they're going to have still a bunch of women, and what do you do? Well, that's what you think, right? Well, not necessarily. There's a case study. If you ever study Viking ship finds, you'll find that if you really get into it, they don't make sense. What I think generally happens when you have a raiding culture is that they might, for example, the Rus, or which are the Vikings, who start here and then they go through to Sweden to steal a bunch of women, and then end up in the United Kingdom. And you'll see that the men are from a diverse array of haplogroups, and the women are from a certain area that's not where the ship ends up or the burial site, but from somewhere else. So you get just a ill-defined male Y chromosome, a defined female, and then an odd location. Okay, so that's because they raided somewhere, got a bunch of women, had to do a runner, and then settle somewhere else. That's it. Now in this case, this is what I think has happened. Now the M42 DNA, there's a fantastic map actually, let's just go with this one. The M42, now it's not represented very much in this map, it's in the green, so it's just a tiny slither here. It actually is quite represented around here, I think. But this M42, specifically this haplogroup, is also found in India, in the Dravidian, so-called dark-skinned Indian, typical southern Indian, you'll find M42. But the E1B1 Y chromosome, which you'll find around Mali, is not here at all. So, but you do find the M42, and that's strange for it to be here, but not down here. And what I think is happening, and let's make sure I've covered all the information I'll talk about. There's a lot to go on. Yeah, okay. So what I think has happened in a nutshell is that we are dealing with a complex resource environment. We have either Mali, or we have Ethiopian, or we have whatever. Before I've come up with my conclusion, I just want to cover off one more subject. Okay, here we go. This is an interesting map. Hopefully, sorry, this goes to a, God forbid. Okay, let's just look at this here on this side of the screen. Sorry about that. So this is a theory that the people of Madagascar come from either Asia or Africa. They can't work it out, and they're doing the usual things such as, it's ages ago, and well, actually this is not too bad. It's 1,000 years before present. So we're talking about 1,000 years coming across. So that's obviously related to the greater culture around here being not tens of thousands, but say 1,500, 1,200 years ago. And it's conceivable that we're having migration here and here. It could be either way, and that obviously will impact here. So now the genomes of Madagascar is very complicated. You can see a picture here. Obviously, they look quite unique, and have a diverse genome. So just want to finish up on the final theory. If I could go back and find this map, I think in a nutshell is that Australia has been resourced for a very long time. I mean, we can talk about the south of Australia. That's going to be quite influenced by Huguenot and by French and by Dutch and by Prussian and by British and by Irish. That's a discussion to have, and that's quite important. But just in the desert, I think it was a resource location. It was just a place to pick up these stuff. It had a bunch of ports with a bunch of drunks to just do whatever, and there was obviously either from this side or from Mali, or from both, or a bunch of pirate companies or some of a lower level age would have passed by India, picked up some slaves and moved them across here, female slaves across here, and set up here somehow. And then what I think happened is that once their culture declined, we see the Australian Aboriginal men would have come across with the colonial period. It would have made a greater impact, with probably assistance of the British, undermining the ability for the Africans or the Malays or whoever they were, stopping them from leaving the country, and therefore the male line of the Australian Aborigines, with the C1 haplogroups would have come through and taken out. As you know, Australian culture was, the Aboriginal culture was quite patriarchal. A man would have 2 or 3 wives, and some men would have nothing. So it was a very patriarchal with multiple wives. I think that's what happened. And what that means is that they would have wiped out the previous Y chromosome completely, and that's why you do not see African Y chromosome or DNA here. You only see things via India, and I don't know what that means for. You'd have to do some comparison between the mitochondrial DNA of various parts of the world, because men carry both, and so you'd have to do a bit of an analysis to work out exactly what it is. So that's the general theory, and I think it does explain a lot. And going forward, I think you'll need to do some recuperation of this as an environmental catastrophe from the late Middle Ages. All right, thanks very much.